Gam, earth. Payatam, traversing. Meja, pure. Viviktariti, independent occupation for living. Sada, always. Aplutaha, sanctified. Adha, on the earth. Shayana, lying. Avaduta, without dressing of the hair, etc. Alakshitaha, without being seen. Sai, alone. Avadutavesha, dressed like a mendicant. Patani, vows. Cheri, performed. Haritoshanani, that pleased the Lord. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. While so traversing the earth, he simply performed duties to please the Supreme Lord Hari. His occupation was pure and independent. He was constantly sanctified by taking his bath in holy places. Although he was in the dress of a mendicant and had no hairdressing nor a bed on which to lie. Thus he was always unseen by his various relatives. Please repeat. While so traversing the earth, he simply performed duties to please the Supreme Lord Hari. His occupation was pure and independent. He was constantly sanctified by taking his bath in holy places. Although he was in the dress of a mendicant and had no hairdressing nor a bed on which to lie. Thus he was always unseen by his various relatives. Purport. The first and foremost duty of a pilgrim is to satisfy the Supreme Lord, Hari. While travelling as a pilgrim, one should not be worried about pleasing society. There is no need to depend on social formalities or occupation or dress. One should remain always absorbed in the function of pleasing the Lord. Thus, sanctified by thought and action, one is able to realize the Supreme Lord by the process of a pilgrim's journey. Translation again. While so traversing the earth, he simply performed duties to please the Supreme Lord Hari. His occupation was pure and independent. He was constantly sanctified by taking his bath in holy places. Although he was in the dress of a mendicant and had no hairdressing nor a bed on which to lie. Thus he was always unseen by his various relatives. Om Gyana Trandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshomulatam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karati Vachalam Bhangam Langati Garim Yat Kripa Tam Ham Vande Shri Guram Dinataranam. Hare Krishna. So beg for the blessings of all the Vaishnavas that we can say something relevant to this great, holy, transcendental literature and pastimes of the Lord and His devotees. So you'll have to forgive me, I'm not used to using glasses, but the body's gradually getting older and been putting it off for a while, but especially in this dim light with the dull weather, it's a little harder to see. So this is a very nice pastime about Vidura, Saint Vidura, and eventually he meets up with Maitreya Muni, and they're having great transcendental conversation. Vidura asking many transcendental questions, perfect questions, and Maitreya Muni giving perfect answers on the transcendental path of Krishna consciousness. So Vidura was no ordinary person. He's actually an incarnation of Yamaraj, for those who don't know the story, once Manduka Muni, he gave shelter to some thieves in his ashram, but the police constables, they came along and they caught the thieves and they arrested Manduka Muni as well because they considered that he was one of the thieves. And the magistrate ordered all of them to be put to death. So including Manduka Muni, who was a great sage, he was ordered to be put to death. In those days they had very severe punishments, and this punishment was to be pierced by a lance. Pushed down on very sharp lances and very painfully giving up one's body. So, but the king at the time, he knew that Manduka Muni was innocent, and he knew that he was a great sage, and so he begged the magistrate's pardon that Manduka Muni be pardoned. And then Yamaraj, when Yamaraj came into the story, and it was said that Yamaraj said that he was to be punished like this Manduka Muni because in his childhood he pierced an ant with a sharp stick, and so that's why he was about to be punished in this way. And so Manduka Muni considered that Yamaraj was very unfair, that he was to be punished like this because he committed that crime of piercing an ant, but that was done when he was a very childish boy. Didn't really know what he was doing. So he was released from the punishment, being punished to death, but then Manduka Muni, he because he considered this was a very unfair action on the part of Yamaraj, he cursed Yamaraj to take birth as a Sudra. And so Yamaraj took birth as a Sudra, as Vidura, in the womb of a Sudrani. But because of his great heritage, because his father, he was inseminated from Vyasadeva, from the semen of Vyasadeva. So because of his great heritage, his father was actually Vyasadeva. Then he grew up in this transcendental, very spiritual household. One brother was Pandu, and the other brother was Dhritarashtra, of course, who was blind not only from birth but spiritually blind. But still, Vidura was in this transcendental household where Krishna used to come at his will all the time and visit especially the Pandavas and Vidura. And so he was a very transcendental, saintly person from his very birth. And as we know, the pastime that throughout leading up to the Battle of Kurukshetra and throughout the Battle of Kurukshetra, he is trying to persuade Dhritarashtra, his elder brother, dissuade Dhritarashtra from continuing on with his war, and to give the rightful throne to Yudhisthira, who was the rightful king, and to give the land back to the Pandavas that they were rightfully should inherit. But of course Dhritarashtra, because he was spiritually blind and very attached to his eldest son and his 100 sons, Duryodhana, and his younger brothers, Dhritarashtra couldn't properly hear the transcendental instructions of Vidura. And he was very selfishly motivated in wanting his sons to be the rulers of the earth at the time. So this is Vidura, and eventually, as we heard in the pastime just previously, Duryodhana in a very offensive way, he criticised Vidura, and because Vidura was always preaching against the demoniac diplomatic propensities and actions of Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra, and always, favouring the Pandavas, then Duryodhana eventually, in a very nasty way, he said that Vidura should be cast from the palace with only his breath left. So in this way, Vidura, he took this as Krishna's arrangement that he should leave the royal palace and become fully renounced and travel to holy places. So this is the point where he's at. He's travelling to holy places in a very detached way. So this was in the Vedic culture, this was the mood of the Vanaprasthas living home as a grihastha, taking up the Vanaprastha order. They would leave home, become detached from their family situation, live very simply, go to the holy places and fully immerse themselves in pleasing the Lord and in Krishna conscious activities. As we see in the verse here, while he was traversing the earth, he simply performed duties to please the Supreme Lord. Hari Toshanani, activities that please the Lord. There's that verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Samsadi Hari Toshanam, that one should act in such a way that he's always pleasing Krishna. And in Prabhupada's purport, he emphasizes this point 2 times. It's a short purport, but 2 times he emphasizes the first and foremost duty of a pilgrim is to satisfy the Supreme Lord Hari. And then further on the verse he says one should remain always absorbed in the function of pleasing the Lord. And by this thought and action, one is able to realize the Supreme Lord by the process of a pilgrim's journey. So this is the process to realize Krishna, to fully immerse oneself in thought of Krishna and fully realize the transcendental nature of Krishna, fully realize one's spiritual connection as an eternal servant of Krishna, is through this process of always acting in the service of Krishna and always thinking of the activities and glories of Krishna. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Tasmat saveshu kaleshu ma manushmara yojita mayapita mano buddhi mamevashat shamshayi. Therefore you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, at the same time carry out your prescribed duties of fighting. He says to Arjuna, with your activities dedicated to me, your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. So this is also our business, is that while we're aspiring devotees, we're acting in so many ways to please and serve Krishna, we should always be thinking of Krishna internally, thinking of Krishna's forms, his qualities, his names, his pastimes, his service. And as Srila Prabhupada pointed out in one lecture, this is real liberation. The so-called yogis or so-called transcendentalists, the impersonalists, they think that when they get liberation, they'll merge into Krishna's form, become one with Krishna, or they may achieve 4 arms, like Paundraka, right? He was false incarnation of Krishna, falsely advertising himself as Vasudeva, and he assumed 2 extra arms. And he was adorned himself with the yellow robes like Krishna, yellow dhoti, and he had a peacock feather, and he had the imitation kastuba gem. And when Krishna came in his presence, he was saying that, I've incarnated out of my causeless mercy upon the fallen conditioned souls. And he was stating that you are the false Vasudeva. He was saying this to Krishna. But Krishna was just laughing because he fully understood that this was a very cheap imitation. And, eventually Krishna, he killed Paundraka very easily through his Sudarshan disc, chopped off his head. So there's so many false incarnations like this. And they're thinking that, real liberation is to become one with God or to become God. Like Srila Prabhupada said, that when he first came to the West, some of you are thinking that there is no God, some of you are thinking that God is dead, and some of you are thinking that we are all God. But Srila Prabhupada said, I've come to kick out all this nonsense and teach that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But Prabhupada said this is real liberation, to be always immersed in Krishna consciousness. As described in the Bhagavatam, mukti hitvanyata rupam sarupena vyavastitye. This real liberation means to be always immersed in the thoughts of Krishna, service to Krishna, spreading the glories of Krishna all around the world, bringing other people to the lotus feet of Krishna, making plans how to spread this Krishna consciousness movement. Srila Prabhupada said in one lecture, this is real liberation. So we're all, like this verse states, that gives the example of Vidura. He was a pilgrim. He became a wandering mendicant, wandering pilgrim. But we're all pilgrims in this material world because we don't belong here. This is not our real home. And we cannot be happy on the material platform of sense gratification. And we cannot stay here forever. Krishna says, for one who has taken his birth, death is certain. After death, one is sure to take birth again. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. So death is certain, just like Srila Prabhupada said. Even a king may be at the ocean ordering the waves not to come in, but the waves keep coming in. So time and tide waited for no man. So just as birth is certain and old age and disease, so death is certain. So we're all pilgrims. We don't have a home where we can stay forever. We cannot make a permanent situation in this material world. We're all guests. Just like one of my good friends and Yugo Cool, Amrita Nanda Prabhu. Has so many realizations, and he's a great preacher, and he's always telling me that this is not your house. You're a guest in this house. Actually, in the Vedic culture, the house belongs to the wife, but ultimately it belongs to Krishna. Everything belongs to Krishna. So he always reminds me, you're just a guest for some time. And we've had so many births in this material world. We may be in a fortunate position in this world, like Prabhupada says, in an aristocratic position in one life, but next life you may be a pauper. Or in another life you may be a dog or a demigod or a worm in stool. But in every situation, we're thinking, we're satisfied, we're thinking we're happy, we're thinking we've got it made. Just like Prabhupada says, the worm and stool. Even the worm and stools are thinking they're completely satisfied. They're thinking that this is a very comfortable home, and if someone pulls the worm out of the stool, he'll just crawl back in. So like even the story of Indra, he became cursed because of his offences to his spiritual master Brihaspati. He became a pig. He fell down from heaven and became a pig on this planet. And he had a female white pig and children piglets. He was wallowing in mud and stool, and he was thinking he was completely satisfied. Lord Brahma came to preach to him, what are you doing? You're the king of heaven. Now because of your offences, you're wallowing in the horrible existence as a pig. Why don't you leave this existence and come back to heaven? And Lord Indra said, no, it's all right, I'm completely satisfied. And so Lord Brahma was thinking how to wake up this foolish demigod. So he thought this is the plan. I'll kill his family members one by one. So he started killing the different family members, different pig family members. And eventually it was only Indra left, and he realized, yes, I'm such a fool. I should go back to my home as the king of heaven. Of course, even that's a temporary situation. Even the demigods, it may seem like a wonderful, long life full of so many opportunities for sense gratification, and it may seem practically almost eternal. These demigods live for millions and millions of years. Lord Brahma, what's his lifespan? 40 billion? Or 300 trillion, 40 billion years, right? So it seems like an eternal existence, but even Lord Brahma has to give up that situation. Abrahma bhuvanaloka purna avatano jana mamo pecha tukuntaya purna janmana vijate. From the highest planet down to the lowest planet, all are places of misery where repeated birth and death takes place, but one who attains my eternal abode never takes birth again in this material world. So, and this continuous cycle of samsara, going through all different species of life, sometimes up, sometimes down. This is like, Prabhupada gives the example, it's like a man who's being punished, a prisoner. In the old days they used to take a prisoner out in a lake. They'd take him out in a boat, they'd tie him to a chair and they'd dunk him in the river, and he'd almost be at the point where he'd drowned, and then they'd pull him up and he'd get a few breaths of air and he'd think, oh, that's so nice, that air, fresh air, and then they dunk him down again. They keep doing this. This was a severe form of punishment. So this is like us in the material world. We're thinking when we have a nice, so-called nice situation as a human being and with a nice house or lots of money or nice cars or nice family situation, or as a demigod, we're thinking this is a very wonderful situation. But at any moment that can be taken away from us, and we may take birth in our next life as who knows where. As a dog, like Prabhupada said about previous president of India, Nehru, that in his next life he took birth as a poodle in Sweden. Big position, but who knows what the next life is. So, but the only guarantee is by taking to Krishna consciousness. Then, as Krishna guarantees in the Bhagavad Gita, Suchanam Srimatam Gehe Yoga Brashta Vijayate, that those who, if they practice Krishna consciousness, this transcendental yoga system, and they give up after short practice, they're born into a family of aristocratic personalities. But if they're not successful after long practice, they're born into a family of transcendentalists. So at least if we don't go back to the spiritual world at the end of this life, then Krishna guarantees one is born in a family of devotees. Very fortunate. We see all these young children from their very birth, and even before their birth in the womb, they were hearing the holy names, hearing the kirtan, hearing Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, constantly hearing the Hare Krishna mantra, hearing the Bhagavatam, taking prasadam that the mothers were ingesting. So a very fortunate situation. When they come out, they're surrounded by devotees, coming to the temple, coming to the festivals, going to the Gurukul. But at the same time, Srila Prabhupada said, back home, back to Godhead, we should make plans to solve the problems of life, which is birth, death, old age and disease, this temporary situation of distress and anxiety, and go back to the spiritual world for a life of eternity, bliss and knowledge in full association and full service with Krishna. So, but we have so many attachments. So many attachments in this world. It's not easy to give up these attachments, especially in household life. So many attachments. Pumsastriya mituni bhavametam. That this material existence is based on this attachment between male and female, on the basis of this misconception which ties together the hearts of the male and female. One becomes more and more attached to home, children, relatives, wealth, possessions like this. So even as aspiring devotees, we see that we sometimes get attached to so many things, and even the brahmachari may be attached to his saffron robes. Many of us have that experience when we were brahmacharis and we were like about to enter the grihastha ashram. It was so hard to give up the saffron robes, right? Very hard to put on the white robes. To give up, to put our flag up and say, now we surrender. I surrender. Surrender to my, material desires. So, but that's all right. In Krishna consciousness, we can engage those material desires by having a Krishna conscious family and fulfill certain desires to have wife, children, regulated sex life, material attachments, house, and engage all those things in Krishna consciousness, and gradually we become purified from all those attachments and desires. But we see, even as aspiring devotees, we have so many attachments. We're attached, as I said, attached to our place of residence, our wife, children, attached to our... We may be even attached in the temple to the place we sit every day, or the place we stand for kirtan. Devotees have the same place. No? Maybe when they pass away, we can put a little plaque on that square there, such and such, and someone else sat on that square down there. Somehow or other we have to transfer, or as Srila Prabhupada says, dovetail our attachments to the attachment of lotus feet of Guru and Krishna. And then through this transcendental attachment, by always pleasing the Lord, as the verse in purport here is stating, that we should always act in such a way like Vidura to please the Lord through all our actions, all our service, all our preaching, all our thoughts. This is the main goal of life, is to please Krishna. And in this way we will become more and more attached to Krishna. And then there's a naturally we become detached. What's that verse? By service, rendering service to Krishna by, anyone remember that verse? Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Jnanayat. How's it go? Jnanam Chayada. I had to come. By rendering devotional service to Krishna, one automatically acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. So, yes, we have to be very careful of being too overly attached in this material world. Just like Prabhupada gives the story of the Brahmana and his copins. He was a brahmachari, but then he desired to get married. So he initially only had 1 or 2 sets of cloth, as a brahmachari does, and a couple of sets of copins, but then he desired to get married, so he wanted to get a wife, and then to satisfy the wife he had to get a house, and then to satisfy the wife she wanted children, and to give milk to the children he had to get a cow, and he had to get so much situation food to feed the cow, and then so many material arrangements to satisfy the wife and the children in the house. And in the end, he ended up with so much material accumulation, so much attachment. And he was thinking, why didn't I just stay in my simple life with a few sets of cloth? Oh, that's right. That was the beginning of the story. Was partly he took to the household life because he was getting annoyed because the rats were eating his copins. So then he got a cat to eat the rat, and then he had to get a cow to feed the cat with the milk. And then he needed someone to milk the cow, so that's how he got the wife. On and on. So, in Krishna consciousness, to maximize our time in serving and pleasing Krishna and engaging in spreading the glories of Krishna, we should try and live a simple life as much as possible, so that we have ultimate amount of time for engaging in Krishna conscious activities. And take advantage of the programs that Srila Prabhupada has given us, these temple programs, because they give us so much strength and enthusiasm and determination. As much as possible, attend the morning and evening programs and engage in some sort of direct service to Krishna, whether it's worshipping the deities, cooking, doing work on the farm here, or serving in one of the restaurants, or going out in book distribution, Harinam Sankirtan. Of course, in household life we have so many distractions, so many things which maybe not directly service to Krishna. Of course, raising a family in Krishna consciousness is service to Krishna as well. But we should also see how we can directly support the temple and come and join in these programs to inspire each other. We should all think that we're setting an example for so many other devotees just by us being present in the temple, being present in the morning program every day, even if we can't attend the whole program. Just by being here, so many other devotees are becoming inspired by our actions, our service. So not that we should think that we're anyone great to inspire other devotees in Krishna consciousness, but we should always think that action speaks louder than words. We may be not so expert in preaching or presenting Krishna consciousness or giving Krishna consciousness to others, but just by our simple actions of trying to please the Lord, trying to serve the Lord, trying to follow the programs given by the acharyas like Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada's given us this whole program, which is very important, very powerful, and we should not neglect any part of this program. We should not think that, I don't need to go to Mangalarti, or maybe I can, skip Mangalarti and just come for the class, especially if we're devotees are, living like a simple life like brahmacharini. You should try and attend the whole program as much as possible and be fully engaged 24 hours a day in service. Of course, as in the Grihastha ashram, it's difficult maybe to attend all the programs. We have so many other responsibilities. But still, anyone has time to come and hear the Srimad Bhagavatam occasionally, or come to some kirtan if it's once a day or once a week. And it's so powerful, these processes are so powerful, to hear these transcendental pastimes of the Lord and his pure devotees like Vidura. It's very, very purifying, very, very enlivening, very ecstatic. And we can definitely feel the benefit if one applies himself with all determination and diligence and enthusiasm. Then we can experience the transcendental benefit of immersing ourselves in kirtan, in hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, in associating with devotees, coming to the temple, serving the deities. These are the 5 most powerful items of devotional service in which we can make rapid advancement in Krishna consciousness. And as Rupa Goswami says in the Nectar of Instruction, we have to accept whatever's favourable for Krishna consciousness and reject all the unfavourable things. So the favourable things are being enthusiastic, being determined, being confident that by following this process we can achieve the perfection of life, Krishna Prem, pure love for Krishna, and go back to the spiritual world. Be fully purified of all our anarthas, unwanted desires within the heart. And favourable things, like I said, coming to the temple programs, associating with devotees. The unfavourable things, we should, Rupa Goswami says, overeating, over-collecting more than one requires, being greedy for mundane achievement, following the rules and regulations of the scriptures only for the sake of, what does he say? Following them, and not for the sake of spiritual advancement. Or rejecting the rules and regulations and acting independently and whimsically. And so many, and of course, avoiding the sinful activities, meat eating, intoxication, gambling, illicit sex. Like Prabhupada says, the 4 do nots, and the 1 do, chanting at least 16 rounds a day. So this is chanting our rounds. This is another item that's very favourable, and giving up the 4 sinful activities. These things are very detrimental for one's spiritual life, because like meat eating destroys compassion, intoxication destroys discipline or austerity, gambling destroys truthfulness, and what's the other one? Illicit sex destroys cleanliness. So these are the 4 pillars or legs of religion. And if we don't give these activities up, it's very like a stumbling block, a big stumbling block in our spiritual advancement. And of course, Srila Prabhupada has given us so many favourable things: taking prasadam, reading the books regularly, engaging in preaching activities, engaging in so many activities of service, coming to the festivals. These are all very wonderful, favourable things for our advancement in Krishna consciousness, for becoming purified, for becoming fixed, for becoming ecstatic in Krishna's service, just like on the weekend we're meant to be, by Krishna's arrangement, having Rath Yatra. So it's always a wonderful festival, Rath Yatra. Hundreds of devotees coming together, pulling the cart of Lord Jagannath for his pleasure, and so much ecstatic kirtan, dancing, chanting and feasting. So the festivals, the mothers of enjoyment. So we should take advantage of all these wonderful opportunities. And not waste our time in mundane activities, as Prabhupada says somewhere. I seem to remember it was somewhere in the first canto. He says, devotees don't engage in mundane sports, gambling, drinking, reading mundane literature, newspapers. But of course we can listen over and over to the transcendental news from the spiritual world in the form of these literatures, in the form of Srila Prabhupada's lectures from many great souls in ISKCON. And we never tire of hearing these transcendental messages and literatures. Because mundane news and mundane activity is static, becomes more and more distasteful the more and more one tries to immerse oneself in sense gratification. But transcendental activity is ecstatic. It's an anandam buddhivardhanam, an ever-increasing ocean of transcendental pleasure. So we can listen to the news, but only transcendental news. So it's 20 past 8, so here's the 20 past 8 news from Srila Prabhupada. You can hear for a minute. It's actually run out of battery, unfortunately. Anyway, these things are very wonderful. We can use in Krishna's service. You can have these and you can be listening to Srila Prabhupada like 24 hours a day. They just go on, lecture after lecture, all through the day, all through the night. Whatever activities you're doing, you can carry this around with you or on your phone and be hearing constantly from the pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada. So we'll finish there, see if anyone has any questions or comments. Do we have another microphone available? So we can just read the verse again and see if anyone has any questions. Whilst traversing the earth, he simply performed duties to please the Supreme Lord Hari. His occupation was pure and independent. He was constantly sanctified by taking his bath in holy places, although he was in the dress of a mendicant and had no hairdressing, nor a bed on which to lie. Thus he was always unseen by his various relatives. Anything? Yes, Prabhu. Do we have a microphone, or does anyone know where it is? Okay. Far ahead.
One should not be worried about losing society.
Right.
If you might comment on that, because Srila was very concerned about how we relate to society. Our behaviour is correct and proper. We should set examples. So how we relate to this state here, one should not be worried about losing society.
Well, Prabhupada did say also you have to follow the laws of the land. So whatever laws are in this particular country by the, mundane governments, then we have to follow those laws. Just like Prabhupada says, you have to, if the law is you drive on the left-hand side of the road, you have to drive on the left-hand side. If you drive on the right-hand side, either you'll be involved in a big accident or you'll get a heavy fine. So, yeah, we should... we should act in such a way that we look like perfect ladies and gentlemen when we go out in public, dress very nicely, and in our preaching we should be very respectful to everyone whom we meet, and be very kind to them and have good manners. But At the same time, we shouldn't think that through my actions I have to please society, because Prabhupada says, like, materially you can never please society. You can never please your mundane family members. It's like in Krishna consciousness, you cannot put the cart before the horse. You have to put the horse before the cart. So the only way actually we can satisfy all living entities, or society in general, is by becoming Krishna conscious. And automatically by becoming Krishna conscious, the whole world is benefited. So, just like Prabhupada would quote that verse, Yata Taro Mona Nisechenena Tripyati Tatskanda Bishopishaka, that by watering the root of the tree, all the leaves and branches and twigs become nourished. So similarly, by putting food into your mouth, all the senses become enlivened and nourished. So similarly, by serving Krishna, all the demigods and all other living entities become pleased and benefited. So this is the real way to please society and please all living entities, is by becoming Krishna conscious. But obviously on the external platform, we have to act in such a way that people don't think that we're crazy. By dressing nicely, acting nicely with our interactions with the public, not doing crazy things. So this is my little realization that I have on that question. Does that sort of answer the question? Would anyone like to add to that? Yeah, so materially speaking, you may try to please so many people in society or family members through your actions or through your dress or your work, but we see that it never really works. People are never satisfied with our activities on the material platform. But by becoming Krishna conscious, we can be an example to the whole world, just like Sanat Goswami said about Haridas Thakur, that some people preach very nicely but they do not act very nicely, and other people act very nicely but they do not preach very nicely. He said simultaneously, you are acting very nicely and preaching very nicely in relationship to the holy name, therefore you're qualified to be the spiritual master of the entire world. So if we always acting very nicely in Krishna consciousness, internally, externally, setting a good example and preaching very nicely Krishna consciousness, then we can have so much effect on so many thousands of people, like Srila Prabhupada, the perfect example, right? He had effect on millions of people through his perfect actions and his perfect preaching. And he was like a perfect gentleman. So like the Goswamis, right? It was said that they're a friend to one and all, not only to the gentle but to the ruffians also. So in the Vedic culture, even if a stranger came to your door, the devotees would treat that person so nicely that that enemy or stranger their heart would melt and their nasty attitude would change. So we can be like this, that if we become so purified and we're acting very nicely like a perfect gentleman or a perfect lady, and then it will have so much impact even on the people in general when we meet people in public. So, any other questions, comments, realizations? Yes?
I read recently information that you're saying about it's from the Srimad Bhagavatam region, and there's a verse saying that if someone falls down from Krishna consciousness, then they may take birth in a family of devotees and continue on to the same. And this verse is saying that better than that is when Krishna gives the mercy in a different way and takes away everything from the person. He takes everything away in that same life, yet they still forget Krishna's lotus feet. So higher than that is if Krishna decides to take the gifting away from the person in their life.
Yeah, and a perfect example is like Queen Kunti, right? She says, Vipada Santa Tasvasya Tatra Tatra Jagat Guru. That may those calamities come again and again, so that we may see you again and again. For seeing you means we no longer take repeated birth again and death in this material world. So of course we're not on the platform of Kunti. And we're not on the platform where we usually pray like this for calamities to come our way. We're praying that those calamities may go away. But this is a very elevated, pure platform, and if someone is very fortunate to get so many calamities, like you say, coming their way, everything's pulled from under their feet, they lose everything, maybe they lose their wealth, they lose their family, or they lose their health, or their house, everything's taken away, then this is a great blessing on a higher level. Because especially for a devotee, it can put them in a position where they become helpless and really calling out to the Lord with great feeling. Whereas on the other hand, Queen Kunti says, those who are too enamoured by Janma Shashruta Shubir Edamana Madam Puman, those who are too enamoured by high birth, high parentage, great education, and bodily beauty, they cannot approach you with sincere feeling. So these things, on the other hand, it can be like stumbling blocks. So for an advanced devotee, it's a great benediction, and if it happens to us, then that's Krishna's mercy. We have to try and see it like that. It may be hard to see it like that, but if we go on with our Krishna consciousness, then whatever tribulations happen to us, we can gradually see that that's for my purification and for my becoming more Krishna conscious, so that I can have more determination to immerse myself in the lotus feet of Guru and Krishna. Nice question, thank you. I think we'll have to finish there. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanandi.